what is data-driven instruction? Why is it important? And should you be using it as a teacher? Well, data-driven instruction is the practice of using data, which you oftentimes gather from assessment. Everything that you do is you're assessing students. Even if you're just staring at them, right? And you think that you're not doing anything, and maybe they're not even doing anything. You're still assessing them. And we assess everybody all the time. You don't even got to be a teacher for this, right? Imagine that you're walking down the street, right? You're always assessing people, because if you see somebody do something crazy, then you're walking away. You're going to the other side of the road, right? Like if somebody's just sitting there with like a baseball bat full of nails and they're just eyeing you down, right? Like you're going to notice, right? Or maybe they're walking and they drop their wallet. It's like you were assessing them, right? Because if something like that did happen, even subconsciously you're doing it, then you're going to, I don't know, maybe alter your actions to accommodate the situation. Well, teachers are no different, right? We're constantly collecting data, and that can be broken up into two different portions, right? So you're constantly using this data to inform your decisions, right? But how do you collect it? Well, there's two different ways. There's one called formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment is really informal, so just observations as well as just like little worksheets, right? So it's not all encompassing of a unit or an objective or a standard, unlike summative assessment, but it's a lot of but it can be a little bit more formal, right? So like a worksheet would be formative assessment. Observations would be formative assessment. Exit slips are formative assessments. Little projects would be a formative assessment, right? But then when you get to the bigger things, right? Like a final exam, a midterm, a unit exam, maybe like a nice big quiz. Those are summative assessments, right? So it's trying to assess the amount of knowledge kids have in their totality for a particular objective or standard. And so that's how you're collecting this data, and you want to use that data to inform your instruction, right? So you don't just want to teach randomly, right, and hope that students get it, right? Because that's not the right way to be thinking about things, right? The way to be thinking about things is, look, if everybody understands it, you move on. If they don't understand it, you go back and you reteach it, or you clarify some things, right? So you don't just teach at a whim, doing whatever you want. You have to actually look at the data, how your students are responding to things. So if everybody does terrible on an exam and you tried a new teaching method, well then you probably don't need to do that teaching method again. And if you do, then you just have to alter the way in which it was implemented. And so these things are very vital, these assessments, and they're going to give you a lot of good information to alter your instruction. Another thing that we talked about too is that there's baselines to data, right? I mean, not everybody's going to have the highest scores out there, and it's unfortunate, right? The analogy that I gave is like, look, you could put somebody in the best school in the country, right? And they wouldn't even teach, right? They would just sit there and they wouldn't even teach the students at all, and the students would still score higher than most other schools in the state, right? And so, like, I mean, let's be honest here. Like, there's going to be like some, motivation or elements that you just cannot simply control. There's going to be kids who just, sometimes they're just coming in the classroom better, right? And they're also, better in the sense that they're more motivated, and also better in the sense that they're more prepared, right? Because think about it, right? Like, you're going to have kids all the time when you get into being a teacher, right? And they'll be, 3, 4, 5 grade levels behind, and like that's normal, right? Like, I think the average reading level in the United States is about 4th grade. Right, and so the idea that like everybody's coming in prepared for all of these different grades, it's like that is just so optimistic. But ignorance is bliss, right? And so maybe they just want to keep thinking that way, but that's just simply not how the world works. And so, do take that into consideration. There's going to be different baselines, right? So, what is average at one school is going to be different than the average at another school. And that's not to say that you can't raise that average, or that you shouldn't have extremely high expectations, right? But it is to say that you should not necessarily get upset with yourself or too sad if you're not achieving the highest scores in the state, right? But I mean, I don't know, maybe not everybody wants to get the highest scores in the state, but that's what you should be striving for as a teacher, right? You always want to have the highest scores possible. And, but you just have to recognize that you might not always get there. And that's okay, right? As long as you're constantly pushing the envelope and just going higher and higher and higher. Even if that higher tends to plateau and you're just getting a tick higher every year, right? Some little tiny significant difference, right? That's still better than nothing. And so, well, that was data-driven instruction. And so